Hi, Misha here, and just before Thanksgiving I got a shipment of 3 models from Eaglemoss. Kind of interesting, they usually release 2 at a time, but this was 3. Have the Tellurian Batris Freighter, have the Earth Starship Sarajevo, and actually we're going to talk about 2 relatively recent models. The Excelsior prototypes. Here we have an issue that I've been holding off doing a video on till the other one came in. This is issue 152, and this is issue 158. Both are considered Excelsior prototype, also known as study models. First meant for the 3rd movie, Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. And then, of course, for comparison, I brought out the original Excelsior model from our collection that we've had for a long time. And also the Enterprise B refit that we've had almost as long. But it kind of all began here. These 2 are obviously the 4 nacelle versions. This one's a little more streamlined, long, angular. And this one's a little more, feels kind of a little more flushed out. Still 4 nacelles, but a little bulkier, a little more detail. And there was also a 2 nacelle prototype that we're going to be getting in the collection, but it's several issues out and I didn't feel like waiting any longer, so I can always do an update then. But I thought we'd look at the 4 nacelle. And the reason that they did a 4 nacelle, they studied both 2 and 4, obviously they went with the 2, but they were trying to make something that looked more powerful, faster, more intimidating, more capable than the Enterprise 1701 Constitution class refit. So the idea was, hey, let's throw 4 nacelles on. Now, in universe, there's really no information on these classes. Let's just talk about the Excelsior real quick. This is the one we saw in the 3rd film. It also appeared in the 4th and the 6th. It was known as the Great Experiment. It was also referred to as a super starship, at least behind the scenes. The Enterprise was around 300 meters. This was around 467 meters long. So about 50%, a little more greater. It was to test out transwarp drive. It had twice the photon torpedo tubes, updated phasers, much more powerful shields, 34 decks, and a crew of roughly 700 to 750. We're still kind of in that era when they were really packing them on board the ships. Remember, the Constitution had 400 to 450. Also has pretty substantial cargo bays underneath for supply and whatnot. But as we know, this was the Great Experiment, ready for trials in the year 2384. Scotty tempered with it, and it fails after chasing the Enterprise out of space dock. And the next time we see it around 2387, it's still either in space dock or stationed relatively near Earth. We can maybe assume it's still undergoing trials or testing. It's often been stated that the transwarp drive straight up failed, even without Scotty's help. So it's possible it took a couple of years to retrofit it with more conventional engines. Even if it has more conventional engines, it's still faster than the Enterprise. It has a max warp in the 23rd century of about 9, whereas the Enterprise's max warp was 8. In the 24th century, which this was still in service by, we can assume it's a little faster. These were continually upgraded and updated. In fact, the Excelsior itself was given a minor refit in the late 2380s. They went to a new bridge. They also updated the impulse engines a bit, and a few other little minor tweaks. We know that the ship was finally released for deep space missions by 2390. And then in 2393, this vessel was launched, the USS Enterprise 1701B. It was given extra impulse engines on the saucer. It has the fins on the engineering hull. It's a little bit longer at about 469, 470 meters, thanks to the slight changes. And this usually just kick off the era in the late 23rd and really running all the way through the 24th century, where the Excelsior class was the backbone of Starfleet. It was a very upgradable ship. We see many older vessels being upgraded during the Next Generation at Deep Space Nine, including the USS Melbourne, the USS Hood, the USS Lakota. We even see these retrofitted with new shields and even up to quantum torpedoes, meaning it must have been a very updatable design. And since it was originally a prototype, that kind of makes sense that it would be modular. Really, there's no reason a decent hull couldn't be continually upgraded. And since this was reasonably large, even by the standards of the 24th century, why not? It's become a Star Trek classic. We first see it in Next Generation, Season 1. The real world reason they used the model was because it was a film quality model that they could use on a television budget. So not only did it give them a chance to reuse a model that cost quite a bit of money, it also gave a better visual than you would typically see on television in the 1980s. And we mostly see the original version here for the simple fact that this version was not created until Generations, which was 1994. So we only really see this, the Enterprise B, and also the USS Lakota has the retrofit styles. But we see plenty of Excelsiors fighting first against the Borg invasion at Wolf 359. And then later we see them all the way through the Dominion War. I mean, they're everywhere. They're in Next Generation over a dozen times. They're in Deep Space Nine over 24 times. They even appear in Voyager half a dozen times. The Excelsior makes kind of a sneak appearance in Enterprise once. And of course it's in 3 out of the 6 original movies. I don't believe it's in Star Trek V. And by the way, it was the 3rd Federation ship seen on screen of all time. The first being the Constitution, assuming we count the 2 Constitutions as the same, and then the Miranda, which was in Wrath of Khan. And these study models, or prototypes, as they're kind of referred to in universe, show that they took a lot of time in designing this ship to get it right for Star Trek 3. There were a total of at least 5 study models, 3 of which we know of. We have this one here. Like I said, it's pretty Pretty flat, pretty straightforward. Very long neck, very flat little saucer. Kind of engines turned on their side. Although they do have kind of the bizarre collectors we would come to expect from the final design. And then we have this one, which has the engines arranged, the nacelles I should say, arranged more vertically, stacked, much larger saucer, or at least a larger scale. We have some stuff on top and bottom. It's more kind of giving an engineering hull. Star drive, secondary. Whereas this one doesn't really have much. It's got this back section that kind of flares out, but this is definitely a more crude, basic overall design. And these were made as pretty much back in the 80s, is just kind of rough castings, rough models, kind of putty and whatnot, for the director, Leonard Nimoy, to pick. And it's neat that they're in the collection. I think it's a little unusual that they put them so close together, only 6 issues apart. But then again, they're getting towards the end, so maybe they just felt like they needed to. As I said, we will get the 2 nacelle study model or prototype in about 10 issues. On screen, these perhaps appear in the Battle of Wolf 359, and they do appear in the episode Unification in the Qualler Depot or Space Dump, where they were basically just throwing anything and everything on screen to give some stuff. Again, this is still the era of practical models back then. They couldn't do CGI stuff. These are kicking around somewhere, and they just threw them back in. They didn't have a whole lot of close-in detail, but they didn't need to, because they're on a standard definition TV screen of, back in that day, 19 inches was considered quite big. 26 inches, you were living large. As far as the models themselves, I think it's pretty clear. The second prototype here, the newest issue that just came in, number 158, is better. It's larger, heavier, has more detail, kind of more everything going on. The engines, the nacelles are much more detailed. They also are straight. This one, everyone I know that has them, the engines are just a little bit caca. Not horrible, but because it's such a thin model, it seems like they're just a little bit tweaked. Of course, they can be moved, heated up, moved, and I think being on the stand actually helps because it kind of forces them in. But it's just a basic, very basic model. I think my, not biggest gripe exactly, but the oddest thing is just this huge neck. It just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of purpose. But it's a prototype, a study, and it is different. I mean, kind of has a cargo ship or conveyor vibe. Don't know. This one looks like a fully fleshed out Starship. I think it's pretty cool. They pretty much took the neck and widened it added some stuff. And it's quite heavy. This is all die-cast metal, with the nacelles being plastic. To be fair, this is all metal too, but it's just so thin. But yeah, I thought I would just kind of do a video dedicated to one of the most prolific and common starships in the Star Trek universe. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.